Imagine a metal band where one member takes his own life, another tries to form a cult-like following around himself, and yet another burns churches, until finally, a brutal murder takes place. This is the story of Mayhem, one of the most disturbing and controversial bands in metal history. In 1968, in Norway, a boy was born into an ordinary family, Øystein Arseth. There were no warning signs in his childhood. He was calm, intelligent, and diligent. His grades were perfect, and he was often at the top of his class. That is until adolescence began. In high school, he became obsessed with metal music, especially the raw guitar tones and dark themes of its most extreme subgenre, black metal. For someone so quiet and polite, his connection to such savage music was striking. After discovering black metal, his interest in school faded and his grades plummeted. He had found a new dream, to form his own black metal band. The first step was choosing a stage name. He called himself Euronymous, a name inspired by Euronymous, the corpse-eating spirit from Greek mythology. Throughout this story, I'll refer to Øystein as Euronymous, and I'll use the stage names of the other musicians as well. Euronymous soon met two others who shared his ambitions: bassist Necrobutcher, Björn Stubberud, and drummer Mannheim, Kjetil Mannheim. The trio named their band Mayhem, a word evoking chaos and destruction. But there was one key element missing: a vocalist. Euronymous tried singing himself, but his voice lacked the filthy, feral tone that black metal demanded. Around this time, Mannheim began drifting away for personal and financial reasons, and his place would soon be taken by one of Norway's most powerful drummers, Hellhammer, Jan Axel Blomberg. For Mayhem to truly make an impact, they needed the voice, someone who could embody darkness itself. Euronymous began searching everywhere, writing to zines, sending letters across Europe's underground scene. The answer came not from Norway, but from neighbouring Sweden. An 18-year-old named Per Ingvar Olin, known by his stage name Dead, sent a demo tape to the band. Inside the envelope, he had also placed a small package, a decaying mouse corpse tied to a tiny cross. That grotesque gesture perfectly expressed the atmosphere Mayhem was seeking. Dead's vocals on the demo were chilling, cold, rusty, reeking of death. Euronymous immediately invited him to join. Dead arrived in Norway with nothing but a small bag. Though it was said he'd stay only temporarily, he had no intention of returning to Sweden. The band rented a run-down wooden house deep in the forest to use as a rehearsal space. Dead moved in, and the group began writing and recording. Within months, they produced raw, abrasive tracks that spread like wildfire through Norway's underground metal circles. Mayhem had become a whispered legend, but behind this growing success, cracks were already forming. Dead was withdrawing further into himself. His depression deepened. His obsession with death, decay, and Satan grew stronger. These weren't just themes in their songs anymore. They were becoming his way of life. When Dead first joined, the others thought he was strange but inspiring. As time passed, they realized his strangeness hid something much darker. He was severely depressed, obsessed with suicide, and constantly spoke of life's emptiness and his desire to leave it behind. Former drummer Mannheim once described Dead's pre-show rituals like this. Before every concert, he would bury his stage clothes in the ground and leave them there for a few days. He wanted them to carry the scent of death. Sometimes he even had dead animals in his bag, which he would smell before going on stage. At first, the other members saw these acts as a kind of dark, artistic expression, but during one concert, Dead crossed a line that shocked even them. Before the show, he smiled and showed the others a knife he'd bought. It was dull, so no one took him seriously. In the middle of the set, he suddenly tried to stab his arm. When the blade failed to cut, he smashed a beer bottle and began slashing his arms with the broken glass. Blood sprayed onto the audience. The band wanted to stop the show, but Dead shouted, "The show must go on!" By the end of the song, he was trembling from blood loss. That performance became one of the most infamous moments in Mayhem's history. Many wondered why he chose the name Dead instead of Death. It was because he didn't see himself as a messenger of death. He believed he was already dead. This perception stemmed from a childhood trauma. As a boy, He was beaten so badly by bullies that he suffered massive internal bleeding. His heart stopped for a short time before being revived. When he regained consciousness, he claimed to have seen a cold blue place. He never forgot it. The same vision appeared in his dreams for years. He believed that place was the realm of the dead. Over time, Dead's relationship with Euronymous began to deteriorate. Euronymous was domineering and controlling. Dead was withdrawn and unpredictable. Whenever they spent time together, arguments erupted. One night, Euronymous played electronic music in the house. Dead despised the genre so much that he grabbed his blanket and went to sleep in the forest. Euronymous, just to annoy him, stopped the music, picked up his shotgun and started shooting birds near where Dead was sleeping. These petty conflicts grew into a dangerous tension. When Euronymous realized how suicidal Dead had become, he didn't try to stop him. Instead, he provoked him, saying things like, "If you really want to die, then just do it." In April 1991, Dead bought a new knife. He was oddly cheerful, more than he had been in months. He kept showing the knife to his friends, smiling. "It's finally sharp enough." No one understood what he meant, or perhaps they didn't want to. And then came April 8, 1991, the day Mayhem would never be the same again. That morning, deep in the Norwegian countryside, the small wooden house the band used as a studio was silent. When Euronymous arrived, he realized he'd forgotten his key. He knocked repeatedly, but no one answered. He fetched a ladder, climbed to the window, and entered the room. The sight that met him was horrifying. Dead had slit his wrists and throat, then used Euronymous's shotgun to blow his head apart. Blood covered the walls, ceiling, and bed. On the floor lay a short note. "Excuse the blood. I belong to the forest. I always have. Maybe no one will understand this, but I am not human. Everything is just a dream, and soon I will wake up." Most of us, faced with such a scene, would immediately call the police. But Euronymous didn't. He left the house, went to the nearest store, bought a camera, and came back. Then he carefully rearranged Dead's lifeless body. Placing the shotgun and knife on the floor for better composition, he pressed the shutter. That photograph would later circulate unofficially in underground circles and eventually become the cover of the bootleg album Dawn of the Black Hearts. The next day, Euronymous called bassist Necrobutcher and said, "Dead did something amazing. He killed himself." Necrobutcher was horrified. "Are you out of your mind?" he asked. Euronymous replied coldly, "I have photos of everything." Enraged, Necrobutcher hung up and told him, "Don't ever call me again unless you destroy those pictures." But Euronymous didn't destroy them. He did the opposite. He distributed the photos among people in the scene. According to some sources, he even mailed one to a fanzine publisher in Colombia, who later used it as an album cover. I can't show the photo here, but according to those who've seen it, Dead's skull was shattered and his brain scattered across the room. That image became both a cursed icon and a disgusting turning point in black metal history. For Necrobutcher, this was the last straw. He couldn't bear the idea of his friend's death being used as a publicity stunt, so he left the band. Years later, he admitted in an interview, "After what Euronymous did to Dead's body, I even thought about killing him myself. Hellhammer, on the other hand, showed his disapproval but chose to stay. Mayhem was now in shambles. Dead's death wasn't just a tragedy, it was the spark that ignited a chain of darkness across Norway's metal scene. Rumours, photos and sensational stories spread through the media like wildfire, surrounding Mayhem in a growing cloud of infamy. But for Euronymous, it wasn't a disaster, it was an opportunity. A few months later, he opened his own record store. He called it Helvete, which means hell in Norwegian. Located in a basement in downtown Oslo, it quickly became the centre of Norway's black metal underground. The walls were painted black, decorated with medieval weapons and demonic imagery. Helvete looked less like a record shop and more like a temple of darkness. There, Euronymous did more than sell records. He preached the philosophy of black metal, surrounding himself with young musicians and holding long, ideological discussions deep into the night. He began surrounding himself with people who shared his beliefs, creating an exclusive group he called the Inner Circle. Members of the Inner Circle would gather late at night in the basement of Helvete, discussing music, Satanism, death, and ancient Norse paganism. Over time, to outsiders, this group began to resemble a cult. Euronymous was becoming a leader figure. People listened to him, followed his ideology, and some even saw him as a kind of satanic prophet. During this period, Euronymous founded his own record label, Deathlike Silence Productions. Its purpose was to promote bands that made what he called true black metal. But along with this rise came an ever-growing sense of arrogance and a desire for control. Euronymous started manipulating those around him, trying to assert authority over everyone in his orbit. It was around this time that a young musician from another Norwegian city caught his attention, Varg Vikernes, better known by his stage name Count Grishnak. Varg had begun making a name for himself in the underground scene with his one-man project, Burzum. He was only 18, but his ideas were as dangerous as his music was innovative. Varg saw himself as an anti-Christian pagan warrior. He believed that Christianity had destroyed the ancient Viking spirit of Norway and spoke with seething hatred toward the faith. Euronymous noticed this dark passion and was intrigued by it. He signed Varg to his record label and even offered him the position of bassist for Mayhem, filling the spot left vacant after Necrobutcher's departure. At first, the relationship between them was strong. Euronymous admired Varg's talent, and Varg was captivated by Euronymous' leadership and charisma. But it was clear that two such powerful egos could not coexist for long. Soon, the atmosphere inside Helvete began to change. Varg's ideas grew increasingly extreme. He started talking about targeting Christian churches. Under his influence, members of the inner circle began discussing dangerous notions like reviving ancient pagan traditions and burning churches to make a statement. And before long, those discussions turned into action. Across Norway, historic wooden churches began to burn one after another. The smoke rising from those ashes darkened not only the sky, but also the country's cultural soul. For a while, no one knew who was behind the attacks. But within Norway's underground scene, everyone knew the truth. Varg Vikernes was responsible. To him, these acts were a sacred mission. He believed that Christianity had destroyed Norway's ancient pagan roots, and by burning the houses of God, he was taking revenge. He burned down a church and took a photograph of it, then used that photo as the cover for a Burzum album. The act inspired both horror and fascination. For days, it dominated newspaper headlines. Varg was no longer just a musician. He was being called the most dangerous man in Norway. Soon after, he was arrested and imprisoned, but due to lack of evidence, he was released after only 1 month. When he got out, he had become something of a legend. His name was everywhere in the media, and his infamy only made him more popular. Within the black metal community, many now saw him as a hero. This deeply disturbed Euronymous. In the scene he had built himself, Varg was now the one everyone was talking about. The young musicians who gathered at Helvete began following Varg's ideas, not Euronymous'. The battle of egos had begun. At first, it started with subtle insults, then turned into open threats. Their relationship completely collapsed over money. Varg claimed Euronymous had withheld the profits from Burzum's record sales. Euronymous accused Varg of lying and called his church burnings cheap publicity stunts. The tension grew. Varg began speaking behind Euronymous' back, calling him a coward and a fraud. Euronymous, in turn, told his close friends that he wanted to punish Varg. Around this time, he allegedly described a disturbing plan. He would invite Varg to his apartment, stun him with a taser, drag him into the forest, tie him up and torture him for hours, all while filming it. He then planned to distribute the footage throughout the black metal scene as a lesson. Most people thought he was bluffing. But the rumour reached Varg's ears, and he took it seriously. August 10th, 1993, Varg, accompanied by his friend Snorre Blackthorn Ruch, drove toward Oslo. In the car they had a knife, a few CDs, and documents for a record deal that supposedly needed signing. At around 3 a.m, they arrived at Euronymous' apartment. Euronymous opened the door, and a tense conversation began. Voices rose, the argument escalated into a fight. Neighbours later told police they heard shouting and sounds of a struggle coming from the stairwell. Then, silence. Varg pulled out his knife and stabbed Euronymous repeatedly. 23 times in total, in the chest, the back, and the neck. Euronymous tried to escape, stumbling into the stairwell, but collapsed and died there. He was 25 years old. The police quickly discovered who the killer was. In Varg's car, they found bloody clothes and several pieces of incriminating evidence. When he was arrested, he showed no remorse whatsoever. In his statement to the press, he claimed it was self-defense, saying that Euronymous had allegedly attacked him with a knife and that he had simply defended himself. But the court didn't believe this story. Showing up at someone's house at 3 a.m., armed with a knife, stabbing them 23 times, and fleeing the scene, that wasn't self-defense. It was premeditated murder. During the trial, Blackthorne, who had accompanied Varg that night, confirmed everything. Yes, Varg went there to kill Euronymous. The verdict was clear. Varg Vikernes was found guilty of premeditated murder and church arson, and sentenced to 21 years in prison, the maximum penalty allowed under Norwegian law. When Varg was imprisoned in 1993, he became one of the most infamous figures in Norwegian history. Ironically, the sentence didn't silence him. It made him even more famous. Norwegian prisons were relatively comfortable, and Varg continued to make music, give interviews, and write books on paganism from his cell. His English was fluent, and he knew how to work the media. Many TV networks interviewed him. In each appearance, he repeated the same message. "I don't believe in God. I believe in the Old Norse spirit. My war against Christianity continues." Even in prison, he received letters from fans around the world, some of whom saw him as a hero. He kept composing new Burzum material, recording with minimal equipment. Not even prison bars could completely silence this dark chapter of black metal. Varg was released in 2009. Today, he still writes about paganism, posts videos on YouTube, and speaks out against what he calls the corruption of the modern world. He lives on a farm, isolated with his family. With Euronymous' death, Mayhem was left in ruins. Necrobutcher withdrew from music for years. Hellhammer remained silent for a while, before rebuilding the band with new members. In 1994, Mayhem released their long-awaited album, the last one to feature Euronymous' work, De Mysteriis Dom Sathanas, The Mysteries of Lord Satan. The record became a milestone in black metal history. It included lyrics written by Dead and guitar riffs composed by Euronymous, making it feel almost like an album created with the Dead, every note echoing with tragedy. Over the years, the band continued with changing lineups. Each new album explored different directions, but none could truly recreate the raw, unsettling energy of their early years. Mayhem became not just a band, but a myth. Today, the story of Mayhem is told not merely as the tale of a music group, but as the story of a generation that tested the limits of human darkness. On one side, people walking the fine line between art and madness. On the other, unchecked power, obsession and death, Dead's tragedy, Euronymous' ambition, and Varg's fanaticisms together. They created one of the most controversial legends in music history. Mayhem still performs today, but every note they play echoes in the shadow of the past. And within that shadow, somewhere deep in the Norwegian forests of the 1980s, one phrase still lingers. Black metal is not just music, it is a spirit, and that spirit never dies.